Good morning. Today we look at Acts chapter 7, verses 1 through 21. Stephen has found himself in trouble with some of the religious leaders of different sects. Especially they talked about the freedmen in chapter 6 and how, Stephen is in front of the church council, the Sanhedrin, the leaders that way, and they've been telling some untruths about him, stretching the truth maybe. Saying that, he said, they said that he said that Jesus of Nazareth would destroy this place. Well, Jesus never said that, but the high priest asks Stephen, are these charges true? Is what they're saying about you true? And rather than say yes or no, Stephen incorporates a tactic. I don't know a tactic, but incorporates something that was often utilized by the Jews, a reminder of who they are. And he begins the story with Abraham. He says, brothers and fathers, listen to me. So it's, this ruling council is all men, and brothers and fathers is a little bit of an odd greeting, I think, but they were, that way. But so he talks about Abraham. And when he was in Mesopotamia, before he lived in Haran, this is going way back, this is, and he talks about how he is, basically as good as dead, but yet God had promised him, these descendants. And when he is, 100 years old, that he has a child, Isaac. And Isaac has a son named Jacob. And Jacob has 12 sons who become the patriarchs of Israel. So Stephen incorporates the reminding the people of who they are as God's nation, as God's chosen nation, descendants of Abraham, descendants of the promise of God to Abraham. And how then he's mentioned Jacob and the 12 patriarchs, the 12 brothers, the 12 sons of Jacob. That's the 12 tribes of Israel are named for each of them. And but how these brothers, 11 of them, sold the youngest out of jealousy into slavery, and how God worked with that unconscionable act of selling your brother into slavery. That was because of their jealousy, but yet how God worked through that. And Joseph rose to a place of prominence in Egypt with the king of Egypt, and how then another king came and didn't remember Joseph, and all of why the Israelites were held in such high esteem by the Egyptian leaders, and the Israelites began to be oppressed. And during this oppression with this new king, he was afraid of so many Israelites, too many Israelites. And the decree then was to, the male children would be put to death. But it's, what we read of his speech today ends basically with the birth of Moses. So, it's at verse 20. At this time Moses was born, and he was beautiful before God. I think we could say we are all beautiful before God. That's a strange way to think, but to each and every one of us, we are beautiful. Or each and every one of us is beautiful to God. Worth everything to God. But we have, I think that's a beautiful line, that he was beautiful before God. And then for 3 months he was brought up in his father's house, and when he was abandoned, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him and brought her up as her own son. And that's where we end our reading today in Stephen's speech. But he's reminding the Israelites of who they are, God's chosen people, and how God has promised all of this. And he's leading up to Jesus, the Messiah, coming. And we'll cover that and get into that more tomorrow. But excuse me. But it's a reminder, I think, for each and every one of us of how we are God's children. how God provides for us in all of those things. And to think about what God has done for us, to realize the enormity of how, because God chose this Israelite nation to be his people, to be a light to the Gentiles, to be the ones that would show the rest of the world the Messiah, to be the nation, this tiny nation, this, that would bring about the salvation of the world through one man, Jesus Christ. And it's, this story is, it's the one that we grew up hearing, we grew up listening to, and it's, makes me think of the song, I Love to Tell the Story. And so this was a part of who the Israelites were, is to remember who they are, God's chosen people. And Stephen is reminding this council of leaders, this high priest, and all of them that are gathered there that day, of how God has worked throughout the generations, for the people of Israel, to live and to survive, and how, he doesn't say, well, I guess he says, they're in Egypt, they're captive to Egypt, because of this sin of the 11 brothers selling their youngest brother into slavery out of their jealousy. But how even through that, that God made good happen. And that's what Joseph says to his brothers. You meant it for evil. You meant it for harm for me, but God used it for good. And it's such a reminder for us that, sometimes we feel worthless. We feel, what good are we doing? I mean, is there any point? And it's, some of us wonder that briefly, what are we doing? And others dwell on it. And some people get really down and depressed with trying to figure out, who they are and what they are and what they're supposed to be doing in life. But to remember that for each and every one of us, just as, Stephen says here, that he was beautiful to God. I mean, we are beautiful to God. I mean, what a thought. I'm you think about the ugliest feeling that you've ever had, the ugliest that you have ever felt, and to think that God looks at you as a part of his beautiful creation. And so Stephen is defending himself with the reminder of who we are, God's children.